The text came at 11:40 on a Friday night. Not a call, a text. From my brother. Mom's not doing well. You should probably come by this weekend if you can. If you can. As if I hadn't been there every single day for the past 14 months. As if I hadn't rearranged my entire teaching schedule, given up my apartment in Portland, moved back into my childhood bedroom, with a suitcase and a broken heart from a relationship I'd sacrificed because I couldn't ask someone to wait while I watched my mother disappear. As if I were an occasional visitor who needed a calendar reminder, instead of the person who knew which side Mom liked to lie on when her back hurt, which nurse on the night shift would actually come when she pressed the call button, and exactly how she took her tea when the nausea was bad, half a spoon of honey, never sugar, with the bag left in just a little longer than the directions said. If you can. I called him back immediately. He didn't answer. I called my sister-in-law next. She picked up on the second ring, which told me she'd been awake, which told me she'd been waiting. She's stable for now, my sister-in-law said. Her voice had that particular smoothness she reserved for conversations she had already rehearsed. We just wanted to keep you in the loop. She'd been married to my brother for 6 years, and she still said we like it was a declaration of territory. I'll be there in the morning, I said. Of course, she said. Take your time. I was there by 7. My mother had been diagnosed with ovarian cancer 22 months before that text. Stage 3, caught late, the kind of diagnosis where the oncologist uses words like aggressive and options in the same breath. My brother had cried at the initial family meeting and then flown back to Chicago 2 days later because he had a conference he couldn't miss. He'd sent flowers, nice ones, from a real florist, with a card that said, "Fighting with you every step of the way." I kept that card for a while. I'm not sure why. Maybe I thought I'd need it later, as evidence of something. I was the one who drove Mom to chemotherapy every Tuesday and Thursday for 8 months. I was the one who learned how to change the port dressing, how to read the blood work numbers that mattered, how to talk to the insurance company in the specific clipped tone that made them process claims faster. I was the one who sat in the hospital parking garage and cried in my car for 20 minutes before going back inside, so Mom wouldn't see my face and feel guilty. My brother visited 4 times in 22 months. Each time, my sister-in-law came with him. Each time, she brought expensive things, cashmere, blankets, a noise machine, a food delivery subscription that Mom didn't have the appetite to use. Each time, she made sure to take photos. Mom in her chair, Mom with my brother's arm around her, the 3 of them on the back porch on a good day when Mom could sit outside. I noticed that I was rarely in those photos, not because I was behind the camera, because I was usually in the kitchen, or on the phone with the pharmacy, or changing the sheets. During the 3rd visit, about 8 months before the end, my sister-in-law sat down at the kitchen table while I was making soup and said, very casually, "You know, we've been thinking, when the time comes, it might make more sense for us to manage things. The estate, the house, all of it. You've done so much already. You shouldn't have to deal with the paperwork on top of everything else." I kept stirring the soup. "Mom has a lawyer," I said. "Everything's already arranged." "Of course," she said. "We just want to make sure it's all handled properly. David worries about you taking on too much." David, my brother, who had been to see his dying mother 4 times in 2 years, worried about me taking on too much. "I appreciate that," I said, and I changed the subject. But I didn't forget it. I mentioned it to Mom the next day, when my sister-in-law had taken my brother out for lunch. Mom listened with her eyes closed, which was how she processed things now, less energy for expression, more for thought. "She's been asking questions," Mom said, finally. "About the house. About what things are worth." She paused. "I've been watching." I didn't ask what she meant. I assumed she was tired. I assumed a lot of things back then. Mom declined quickly in the final 2 months. The cancer had moved. There were decisions about treatment and comfort, and what mattered more time or better time. And Mom made those decisions clearly and without self-pity, which was the most her thing I had ever seen her do. She chose comfort. She chose the hospice team that let her stay home. She chose which music played in the afternoons, and which nights she wanted company, and which nights she just wanted me to sit quietly in the chair by the window and not say anything. I could do that. I had learned to do that. My brother came for the last month. He worked remotely, he said. He set up his laptop in the dining room and took calls with his door half closed. My sister-in-law came on weekends. She reorganized the linen closet without asking anyone, which was such a specific and aggressive act of ownership that I had to go walk around the block twice to stop myself from saying something I couldn't take back. 3 weeks before Mom died, I came home from picking up a prescription to find my sister-in-law sitting with Mom in the bedroom, alone, the door mostly closed. I stood in the hallway for a moment. I could hear my sister-in-law's voice, low and careful, and I could hear the occasional murmur of my mother's response. When I knocked and came in, they both looked up. My sister-in-law had a notepad on her knee. Not a phone, an actual notepad. "Just catching up," my sister-in-law said, and smiled. Mom looked at me over her shoulder. Her expression was steady. It was a look I'd come to understand over 14 months. Not alarm, not distress, but a kind of deliberate patience, like she was watching something unfold that she had already accounted for. I should have understood then. I think some part of me did. Mom died on a Tuesday morning in April, just after sunrise. I was holding her hand. My brother was in the room. My sister-in-law had gone to get coffee from downstairs, which meant she missed it by about 4 minutes, which I have thought about many times since. I don't know what that means. I just know that when I looked up, and my brother's eyes met mine across the bed, there was one single real moment between us. Grief, genuine and unguarded. The two of us, just her children, and then my sister-in-law came back into the room, and the moment closed like a window. The weeks after were a kind of managed chaos. There are so many practical things that happen when someone dies, so many forms and calls and decisions. And I had been the one managing Mom's affairs long enough that most of it fell to me naturally. The hospice team, the funeral home, the obituary, which I wrote and my brother approved via text with a thumbs-up emoji. My sister-in-law handled the flowers for the service, which I thought was a reasonable division of labor, until I noticed she'd also started going through Mom's jewelry box, photographing pieces on her phone. I said nothing. I was too tired to say anything. I told myself we would sort it all out at the estate meeting. The meeting was scheduled for 2 weeks after the funeral, at the office of Mom's attorney, a woman named Patricia Caldwell, who had handled our family's legal matters for almost 15 years. I had met her a handful of times. She had a directness I respected, the kind that came from decades of sitting across from people in some of the worst moments of their lives, and not pretending otherwise. My brother arrived with my sister-in-law, and also with another man I didn't recognize, someone in a good suit, carrying a leather portfolio, who was introduced to me briefly as a colleague before everyone filed into the conference room. Not a friend, not a cousin, a professional, the kind you bring when you're expecting a fight. I sat down across from them, with no one beside me, and I was fine with that. Patricia settled her glasses and set a folder on the table in front of her. "Before we begin," she said, "I want to acknowledge that this is a hard day for all of you, and I appreciate you being here." She paused just long enough for the acknowledgement to land, then opened the folder. "I also need to let you know up front that there are a few things I need to address before we discuss the will itself." The man in the good suit, my sister-in-law's import, leaned slightly forward. "If this is about the amendment, I'll get to that," Patricia said, with a mildness that somehow made it a complete stop. My brother looked at the table. My sister-in-law looked at Patricia. I looked at my brother. "Approximately 6 weeks ago," Patricia said, "this office received a document purporting to be an amendment to your mother's will. The amendment was notarized and submitted through a third party." She slid a copy across the table. "I expect you've seen this, since you submitted it." My sister-in-law's expression didn't change. "What the amendment proposes," Patricia continued, "is to transfer primary inheritance of the family home and all liquid assets to David, with a provision that he assume management of the estate," and a note. She paused here, and something shifted in her tone. Something precise. A note indicating that, as a homeowner with a dual income, I had sufficient resources and did not require additional financial support. My brother's jaw moved. He was looking at the document now. "I didn't write that," I said. "I know," Patricia said. "The amendment is consistent with what Margaret expressed in her final weeks," my sister-in-law said. Her voice was very even. She was concerned about burdening anyone. She wanted David to have the stability too. "Mrs. Caldwell," my sister-in-law's lawyer said, with a slight redirect, "my clients are prepared to demonstrate that this amendment reflects Margaret's wishes as communicated to them directly. We have written accounts of." "I'm sure you do," Patricia said. "However, There are some issues with the amendment's execution that I need to raise. She produced another document. The notarization occurred during a period when Margaret was under palliative sedation for a pain management adjustment. Her primary hospice physician has confirmed she was not able to give informed consent to legal documents during that window. The room was quiet. My brother turned to look at my sister-in-law. It was a quick look, instinctive. She didn't meet it. There's more, Patricia said. The notary who certified the amendment has since contacted this office voluntarily. She has stated in a written declaration that she felt she was not given adequate time to assess your mother's capacity, and that she had concerns she did not voice at the time. Patricia set the declaration on the table. She has cooperated fully. My sister-in-law's lawyer said something about the validity of late declarations. Patricia let him finish. All of that may be relevant in a contested proceeding, Patricia said. But it isn't why we're here today. We're here because of this. She opened a different folder, older, the paper slightly thicker. Mom's signature at the bottom, in the clear, deliberate hand she'd used when she was still strong enough to write the way she meant to. Your mother came to this office 8 months ago, Patricia said. She was accompanied by 2 witnesses, neither of whom has any connection to this estate. She was assessed for capacity by a physician who has submitted a signed statement. The meeting was recorded with her consent. Patricia looked at each of us in turn. She was absolutely clear about what she wanted and why. My brother's face had gone still, in a way I hadn't seen before. Not anger, something quieter and harder. Patricia cleared her throat and began to read. To my son, David, she had written, I leave the contents of the storage unit on Meridian Avenue, which contains his father's tools, his grandfather's fishing gear, and the things of his childhood that he never came back to collect. I hope he finds time, someday, to go through them. There is a box in the back with his little league photos. He was so proud then. I was so proud of him. I heard my brother take a breath. I also leave David the sum of $10,000, with no conditions and no expectations. I know he has built a good life. I know he has a good partner who manages their affairs well. Here Patricia paused for just a fraction of a second. I trust they will continue to do so. To my daughter, I leave the house at 412 Larkspur Lane, all remaining investment accounts, and all personal property not specifically designated otherwise. I leave her these things not because she was present, and David was not, though she was, and he wasn't, but because I watched her choose this. I watched her give up things she cannot get back. I watched her sit with me in the dark when the dark was very dark, and not try to make it into something it wasn't. She learned that from me. I learned it from her. I had to look at the ceiling for a moment. I am also establishing a scholarship fund through the district where she teaches, to be funded at the time of my passing with $250,000 from my investment account. This fund is irrevocable. Its purpose is to help students whose parents cannot afford the things that make school feel possible. Supplies, transportation, the small dignities. My daughter will administer it. I trust her completely. My sister-in-law's lawyer began to speak. Patricia held up one hand, and he stopped. There's a video, Patricia said. Your mother asked me to play it at this meeting. She was very specific about that she wanted it played here, with all of you present. She turned her laptop toward us. This was recorded 8 months ago, the same day she signed. I wasn't sure I could watch. I watched anyway. Mom looked tired in the video. She was sitting in this same conference room, in the chair I was in now, and she was wearing the blue cardigan she used to wear on Sundays, and her hands were folded in her lap, and she looked straight into the camera with the particular steady calm of someone who had decided something and was at peace with it. Hello, she said. If you're watching this, it means things went the way I thought they might. I want you to know, I'm not angry. I was for a while. I'm not anymore. She looked down at her hands for a moment, then back up. David. Sweetheart. I know there are money problems. I know things aren't as good as they look from the outside. I know because your father had the same habit of making things look fine when they weren't, and I spent 30 years learning to read the gap. I wish you'd come to me. I would have helped you. I would have helped you without conditions, without lectures, without making you feel small. That's not who I wanted to be with you. She paused. But I couldn't let the house go. Your grandmother planted those roses. Your sister was born in that upstairs bedroom. Some things are not mine to give away. No matter how much I love you. My brother made a sound. I don't know how to describe it. Something that had been held for a long time. And to whoever is sitting in this room representing interests that aren't my children's, Her voice was entirely even. I hope this closes that chapter clearly enough. Some people come into a family through love, and some come in looking for a door. I see the difference. I always saw the difference. My daughter deserves better than having to explain herself to people who've been counting her square footage. My sister-in-law was very still. My darling, Mom said. And now she was looking at the camera in a way that felt like looking at me specifically. Just me. The way she used to look at me when I was small and had done something she was proud of, and she wanted me to know it without making a fuss. I left you a letter. Patricia has it. Read it when you're alone, not here. Take it home, make the tea the right way, and read it somewhere quiet. I'm so glad I got to be your mother. I'm so glad you came home. The video ended. The room was silent for a long time. My sister-in-law's lawyer gathered his portfolio and said something to her in a low voice. She nodded, once, her face arranged very carefully. My brother hadn't moved. He was sitting with his forearms on the table and his head bent slightly, looking at nothing. In light of the video evidence, the physician's statement, the notary's declaration, and the circumstances surrounding the amendment's execution, Patricia said, I want to be straightforward with you about the exposure here. Filing a fraudulent amendment to a will is a third-degree felony in this state. The hospice physician has already submitted a report regarding the circumstances of the notarization. The district attorney's office has been made aware. My sister-in-law's lawyer said something sharp about prosecutorial discretion. That's correct, Patricia said pleasantly. It is at their discretion, as will be what your client chooses to do in the next several weeks. She looked at my brother. David, I'm sorry for your loss. I've known your mother for a long time. She was a remarkable woman. My brother nodded. He still hadn't looked at me. Then he did. I don't know what either of us expected. We were 42 and 38, sitting in a lawyer's office after our mother's death, and somewhere under all of it, we were still the two kids who had grown up in that house on Larkspur Lane, who had eaten cereal at the same kitchen table and fought over the remote, and been driven to school by the same woman who had just looked out from a laptop screen and said, I'm so glad you came home. I didn't know about the sedation, my brother said. His voice was rough. When she signed it, I didn't know she wasn't. I thought she understood. I looked at him for a long moment. Did you ask her? I said. Did you sit with her and ask her if it was really what she wanted? He didn't answer, which was its own answer. She would have given you money if you'd asked her, I said. You know that. She would have given you whatever she could. It wasn't. He stopped. He looked at my sister-in-law, then back at me. It got complicated. Everything gets complicated, I said. She wasn't. My sister-in-law stood up and said they needed to speak with their counsel privately. She put her hand on my brother's arm, and he stood with her the way people stand when they've been trained to move together in a particular direction. And they left the room, and the man in the good suit followed. Patricia waited until the door was closed. They won't contest it, she said. Not given everything we have. A contest would require explaining the amendment in detail. Under oath, she slid a sealed envelope across the table. Your mother wrote this herself. 3 months ago, when she was still clear. She wanted you to have it. I held the envelope. My mother's handwriting on the front. My name. Just my first name. In the slightly unsteady letters of someone writing slowly and carefully when they knew they were tiring easily. She also told me something else, Patricia said. She said you had mentioned to her, about 6 months ago, that you'd always wanted to go back to school for your master's. That you'd put it off because of the timing. I looked up. The investment accounts are substantial enough that you don't have to put it off anymore, Patricia said. That's not a legal matter, just something she wanted me to say. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time before I could drive. The envelope was in my bag. I didn't open it there. I followed her instruction. I took it home. I made the tea the right way, and I sat in the kitchen of the house that was now mine, at the table where she had made every important decision of my childhood, and I read it. She had written about the roses, and which ones needed cutting back in August, and which ones she'd just been letting go because she'd gotten tired of fighting them. She had written about the loose floorboard at the top of the stairs that she'd never fixed and always meant to. She had written about the summer I was 9, and had gotten so badly sunburned at the lake that she'd spent the whole night putting aloe on my back and telling me stories, and how that night, for some reason, had always felt to her like the clearest version of what she had most wanted to be as a mother, just useful, just present, just the person who showed up. She had written about my brother. She wrote that she loved him without qualification. that she had never stopped hoping he would find his way back to something true, and that she was leaving him a letter too, a separate one, sealed, with instructions that it not be given to him until and unless he asked for it himself. When you're ready, she had written on that one. He would know what it meant when he was ready to know. She had written about the scholarship fund. She wrote that she had named it after her own mother, who had been a school secretary for 30 years and had bought school supplies for kids out of her own pocket every September because some kids couldn't come to school with what they needed and she couldn't watch that happen. Full circle, Mom wrote. That's all I ever wanted for anything. And at the very end, in the last paragraph, she had written, I need you to know that watching you this past year was one of the greatest privileges of my life. Not because you sacrificed things, I wish you hadn't had to, but because I got to see who you really are, unperformed, unguarded, just you, in the difficult ordinary of loving someone who is leaving. You are going to be okay. You have already proven that. Please go live now. The tea recipe is in the blue index box in the second drawer. Take care of the roses. I didn't go for my master's right away. First, I spent 3 months just living in the house, which sounds small but wasn't. I planted things in the garden. I had my students over on Saturday mornings for the tutoring sessions I'd been running out of the school library, and they ate the snacks Mom used to make, and they were loud in the kitchen. And I let them be loud. The scholarship fund launched the following fall. 14 students in the district received awards in the first cycle money for laptops, for transportation passes, for the kind of specific material need that rarely shows up on a grant application because it's too ordinary to seem worthy of documentation. Each award letter went out with a card that said, from the Eleanor May Sutton Fund, because some things should never be obstacles. My grandmother's name, the school secretary who bought notebook paper with her own paycheck. My brother never contested anything. He and my sister-in-law separated 8 months after the estate meeting. I heard about it through my cousin, not through him. He reached out to me once, about a year later, a text that said, I think I'm ready for the letter. I gave Patricia's number and told him to call her directly. I don't know what the letter said. That was between Mom and him. We've talked twice since then. Short conversations, careful, like people learning to walk on a surface they're not sure yet how to trust. It's not what we were. I don't know what it will be. Mom hoped he'd find his way to something honest, and maybe he is. Slowly, in the way that some people only start finding things after they've lost everything they were looking for. I think about that sometimes. What it costs to discover that what you were chasing was worth less than what you were walking away from. My sister-in-law's name is never spoken between us. I imagine she has moved on to some other story, in some other family, performing usefulness while measuring rooms. People like that usually find a new stage. The house is full in the way Mom always wanted it to be. The loose floorboard at the top of the stairs is still loose. I keep meaning to fix it, and then not fixing it, which is probably more sentimental than practical. But there it is. The roses, she told me to take care of, bloomed last August in a way they hadn't in years, overgrown and enormous, and completely unruly. And I stood in the backyard on a Thursday afternoon after my students had gone home, and I just looked at them for a long time. My mother was the smartest person I have ever known. Not because she had degrees or credentials or the right professional vocabulary. She was a woman who had worked as a bookkeeper her entire adult life and driven a 12-year-old sedan until the year before her diagnosis. She was smart in the way that actually matters. She paid attention. She watched things. She let people show her who they were, and she believed them, and she planned accordingly, quietly, without drama, without letting them know they'd already told her everything she needed to know. She knew my sister-in-law was keeping a list of the valuable items in the house. She knew my brother's finances were bad and that desperation had made him borrowable. She knew the amendment was coming before it came, and she did not panic, and she did not confront anyone, and she did not spend her last months in the corrosive machinery of family warfare. She just made sure the truth was in the right hands and waited. She waited because she was still hoping to be wrong. That was the part that broke me open the most. When I understood it, she built an airtight legal protection and then spent the last months of her life hoping she wouldn't need it, hoping my brother would walk into her room one evening and say, Mom, I messed up. I need help, instead of sending a notary at the wrong moment. She kept a letter ready for him and kept hoping the day it would be needed would never come. It's the most human thing I have ever seen anyone do. Hold the truth in one hand and hold hope in the other and refused to put either one down. The pen I use at my desk at home was hers, a plain blue ballpoint from the kitchen drawer. Nothing special, the kind that comes in a pack of 10. She wrote grocery lists with it. She signed birthday cards. She signed her name to a document that protected me and then went home and made dinner. When people ask me about the inheritance, about the estate, about what happened with my brother and the will, I never know quite where to start. The facts are simple enough. The law was clear. The documentation was solid. The right outcome happened, as right outcomes sometimes do when someone has quietly made sure they would. But that's not really what happened. What happened is that a woman who knew she was dying spent some of her remaining energy making sure that the person who showed up would be taken care of, and that the people who only came when there was something to take would find the door already closed. What happened is that she paid attention to her whole life, and she refused to let its final chapter be written by people who had only showed up for the last page. She called that love. I think she was right. The scholarship fund has now served 41 students across 3 years. Every fall, when the awards go out, I make the tea the right way and I read her letter again. Just the last paragraph. Just the part that says, "Please go live now. I am trying." I think she would say I'm doing okay. I think she would tell me to cut back the roses in August and stop leaving the floorboard for later, and at some point actually go back to school like she paid for. I'm working on it, Mom. I'm working on it.